Good morning, good morning, good morning. Come on in, sit down, join us toward the front. You're almost as far away as the people that are home that tuned us in on Facebook Live. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting us into your homes. Is there anybody that is here for the very first time? I don't think so. Awesome. Welcome back, everyone. So today, we are beginning a journey. 2018 marks the 100-year anniversary of the Science of Mind. Isn't that cool? The 100-year anniversary. So we're going to be celebrating this milestone with a year-long theme that will be living the science of mind. Living the science of mind. On page 1 of his book by that same title, Living the Science of Mind, Dr. Holmes writes, "The science of mind is intensely practical because it teaches us how to use the mind principle for definite purposes. Each one of us should learn to become a practitioner of this science, a demonstrator of its principle, a conscious user of its power. The power already exists, but the existence of power is of no particular value to us unless we use it. We must not only be conscious of power, but we must be actively conscious of it." So this year is really a beautiful opportunity to step powerfully into the practices and principles of the science of mind and to begin to really actively and consciously use it. And to do it in a community where we can all support each other on this journey. So welcome to 2018, the year of celebrating the centennial of Spirit, 100 years of Science of Mind.
All right. The reading today is by Ernest Holmes. The science of mind is comparatively new, but the mental experience of the invisible universe is as old as the history of humankind. It is new in that, for the first time in history, we have put together all findings which contribute to the establishment of humankind's relationship with the universe. To that end, we may be able to apply our spiritual understanding to the everyday problems of human life. Thank you, Ernest.
Good morning to those of you who may have just arrived in the sanctuary. The theme for the month of January is Living the Science of Mind. And my talk title today is, What is the Science of Mind? My life has been forever changed by the teachings of the science of mind. And while I don't know about all of you, I do know about many of you, and for many of you, like for me, your lives have also been forever changed. How this shows up for me is that I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is a power and presence that is within me and surrounding me. And I know that this presence is eternally connected to me and that it is always ready, willing, and able to support and to guide me. I now have personal relationship with this inner divinity, a relationship that I never had prior to walking into my first Science of Mind community. I now have practices and tools that I can use to expand and to deepen my relationship with this divine being. Tools and practices such as meditation, contemplation, visioning, and prayer. After learning about and practicing these principles in my own life, I now have an ability to consciously co-create a life that I love, A life that is filled with love and peace and joy and purpose and meaning. What I know about the science of mind is that it is a practical philosophy and way of life that is available to all. And that all who practice its teachings are sure to experience many wonderful shifts and changes in their lives. Now today, as I said before, we are beginning a year in which we will celebrate 100 years of Science of Mind. It's a year in which we are going to dive deeply into these practices and into these principles. In 1918, Ernest Holmes created the magazine Creative Thought. And from that moment on, this idea of the science of mind, this idea of awareness, this idea of awakening really has been expanded into humanity across the entire world around us. In the foreword for Creative Mind and Success, Ernest Holmes wrote, "This foreword is being written in 1957 for the 19th printing of this little book. I have just reread it, probably for the first time since it originally appeared in 1919. And as I read, I contemplated what changes might have occurred in my thinking during those 38 years, what revisions I might make in the manuscript if I were writing it today. There were few, for truth is ageless, timeless, changeless. We may have modified our techniques slightly, for we certainly should make improvements in nearly 4 decades of experience with the law of mind in action. This much I know. If I were writing this book today, it would be penned with far greater conviction than it was in 1919, for during these intervening years I have witnessed proof in hundreds of cases that all is love and all is law in the realm of mind. This too has been my experience, not only in my own life, but as I witnessed the lives of hundreds of people that I have walked this path with. Science of Mind is a spiritual, philosophical, and metaphysical religious movement that falls under the broader umbrella of a new thought movement. Now, in general, the term science of mind applies to the teachings, while the term religious science applies to the organizations. Although, organizationally, we are no longer really using that term, religious science, there are many people who still feel really connected to the original language. Our organizations today are more typically called Centers for Spiritual Living. In his book, The Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes says, religious science is a correlation of the laws of science, the opinions of philosophy, and the revelations of religion applied to human needs and the aspirations of man. And I will, of course, include woman, since he forgot. Now, we can't really talk about the science of mind without talking about Ernest Holmes. It'd be impossible. I thought you all might like to have, did you hear that little southern part I put in there? I thought you all might like to have a little experience of Ernest Holmes, since we can't experience him now. So with the help of Jim Rigsby, I edited this little video clip for you.
This evening, I am going to talk to you about a power for good in the universe, greater than you are, greater than I am, greater than all of us. A power for good that we can use in everyday life, for everything. When the greatest teacher who ever lived said, "It is done unto you as you believe," what do you suppose he was talking about? This mastermind was talking about a spiritual power in the universe, something so close to us that it is indeed nearer than our hands and feet, closer to us than our very neck vein, as the old Talmud said. And so this power is not something we have to go in search after. It is something that is right here, close, nearer than our very breath. How then would we use a power that is so intimate? Certainly we should have to use it in an intimate way, and we would certainly have to believe that the power exists, it's for us, not against us. It is willing and not reluctant. We should actually have to believe that it really is done unto us as we believe. Then we would have to believe. What is belief, anyway? These are the things I want to discuss with you tonight, how it is that we could use this power for good, greater than we are, wonderful, the thing the whole world wants more than anything else in the world, the thing that you and I have for the taking, for the asking, for the using, power that responds to us according to our conviction in it, power that is used in our own mind, in our own thinking, right where we are. How close and how intimate such a power is, and how wonderful it is just to believe that we're going to learn how to use it.
You think? I think he's really cute. The people up here were laughing because when he said closer than the very neck vein, I always thought he was saying closer than the very neck brain. And I was like, I've been a physical therapist for like 25 years. I've never heard of this body part. Anyway, that's Ernest Holmes. And he was born, we'll get it together. He was born on January 21st, 1887, in Lincoln, Maine, to a very poor family. He was one of 9 sons. Whew. Now, he quit school at the age of 15. And while he did quit school and actually never went back except to study public speaking later on in his life, it didn't mean that he stopped learning. One of his brothers used to say that his first word was not mama or daddy, but why. At an early age, he would ask a question, and then seemingly never satisfied with the answer, he would reframe the question, ask it in a little different way. He would even seem to argue with himself, always looking for the why of things, or always looking for the how of things. He was always asking why, even to the point of becoming a little bit of a nuisance to the people around him. He was a voracious reader who discovered Ralph Waldo Emerson on his own initiative at age 8. Wow is right. Has anybody read Ralph Waldo Emerson? I'm still trying to understand most of it. And in his own words, he said, I drank him in like a thirsty traveler. His writings were lifelong friends from my 8th birthday on, read and reread many times. At 15, after he decided to quit school, he then decided that he was going to move to Boston to get a job. He knew that his brother Fenwick really wanted to go to school to become a minister. And Ernest didn't want to interfere with that possibility on financial level, And so he decided that what he wanted to do was to support himself. So he moved to Boston to get a job. In his book, That Was Ernest, The Story of Ernest Holmes and the Religious Science Movement, a man named Reginald C. Armour says, Boston was a melting pot. The Catholic Irish were well represented, but every Protestant faith was there as well, including the descendants of the original Pilgrims and Puritans, Quakers, Unitarians, agnostics, and atheists mingled alike with Baptists, Presbyterians, Methodists, and evangelicals. There were old historic synagogues. There were East Indians from the ships in the harbor. The Buddhist way was not unknown, and the many sons and daughters of the local Chinese restaurateur were among the Sunday crowds strolling in the park. So this move to Boston afforded Ernest an opportunity to really begin to experience all of these other faith traditions. And it also allowed him then to be able to talk to the people and do what he did best. Ask questions. It was also during this time when he was in Boston that he was introduced to Christian Science. Now this introduction came about through a woman named Mrs. Powers. Mrs. Powers and her husband ran the Leland Powers School of the Spoken Word. Sounds cool, huh? The Leland Powers School of the Spoken Word, which was where Ernest went in the only more formal education that he had to learn to become a lecturer. Now, Mrs. Powers was also the second reader of the mother church of the Christian Science organization in Boston. Now, what the second reader does is that that person will read the Bible during the Christian Science services on Sunday. And this particular church, the Mother Church, was the premier church for Christian scientists in the world. So this was a big deal. These people that he met, they were a big deal in the Christian Science community. And they took an immediate liking to Ernest and kind of, in a sense, adopted this now grown farm boy and put him underneath their wing. Ernest was surprised when he would go there to visit, surprised to find that sitting next to the Bible, which was always very prominently laid out in the family parlor, that sitting next to that was another black leather-bound book, also very prominently, and that book was called Science and Health. It was written by Mary Baker Eddy, who was the founder of Christian Science. So, always interested in this why, right? Always interested in finding out and unlocking life's mysteries, Ernest Holmes began to kind of thumb through it a little bit to check it out. And then he ultimately was able to take a borrowed one home with him, and then he just studied it for hours and hours and hours and days and days and days with diligence and with fascination. In 1910, Fenwick was actually ordained as a minister, and he, because of health reasons, relocated to the Los Angeles suburb of Venice, where he became a home missionary, and he started a small but very thriving church. For the next couple of years, every letter that he wrote home to Ernest was always speaking glowingly of the amazing weather and the beautiful scenery in Los Angeles. So in 1912, Ernest decided that he was going to join Fenwick in California. Ernest found Los Angeles to be a very exciting place, a growing city of progressive people who were expanding their horizons, not only physically, but mentally and spiritually. It was a community of stimulating individuals. Anything that you wanted to learn was in all probability being taught in Los Angeles at that time. You could study really anything that you wanted to study, and Ernest Holmes wanted to study, and so study he did. He read and studied everything that he could get a hold of, and a very special interest to him was New Thought. New Thought was in some ways a parallel movement to Christian Science. It traced its origins back to a man named Phineas Parkhurst Quimby. Now, Phineas Parkhurst Quimby was the man who healed Mary Baker Eddy, which started her on her path. You all hanging with me here? The difference was that Mary Baker Eddy had her own revelation. She had her own theology, and she had her own exclusive church organization. If you've ever heard about anything about Mary Baker Eddy and Christian Science, it was really basically her way or the highway. It was that textbook or no textbook. The only other book that they ever read from was the Bible. So it was very exclusive, and it was based on her revelation, her theology. New Thought made no such claims. It was looser, it was more open, and it was based as much as possible on our own results, those that we acquired from practicing the principles in our own lives, from our own revelations, rather than on somebody else's theology or somebody else's revelation. The dictionary calls New Thought a mental healing movement, and is generally devoted to such ideas as spiritual healing, the creative power of constructive thinking, and personal guidance from an inner presence. Now, I found this particular story about Ernest Holmes in a number of different sources. And they all said that one of the jobs that Ernest had when he very first arrived in California was in the purchasing office of the Venice City Hall. Right across the hallway from the office that he worked in, there was another office. A man named H.B. Aiken worked in that office. He was a city engineer. One day, H.B. Aiken came across that hallway wanting to borrow some pipe tobacco from Ernest, and he found Ernest, as always, knee-deep in books. They were everywhere in that office. And he said, "Holmes, you actually read all of these things?" And then Ernest said, "Of course, sure. But you're more than welcome to borrow any one of them that I'm not in the middle of reading right now." And so H.B. borrowed one of those books, and within 2 days he was back in Ernest's office. And he said, "Say, Holmes, I'm having a few people over to my house for dinner tonight. Why don't you come over and tell us a little something about all of this?" he said, pointing to all of these metaphysical titles that were all over the floor. And that's the way it all began. That was the very first time that Ernest Holmes had ever lectured on metaphysics. It led to other lectures in other homes of other friends, until one evening a woman told him, "You're better than any of the other lecturers I have heard at the big metaphysical library downtown on Broadway and 3rd. We have talked to the librarian about you, and we have decided that you should speak at the library next Thursday evening. and will charge a quarter for admission. As it happened, about 24 people were there on that fateful Thursday night, a Thursday night in which an entirely new career was launched. Whenever he spoke, Ernest Holmes always opened up his consciousness and let the Spirit just move through him. He spoke of healing. He spoke of healing of people's bodies, and he spoke of healing of the body of their affairs. They listened, and they loved it. And they told their friends. And their friends told their friends. And those friends told even more friends. And the people kept coming, and the crowds got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then ultimately they had to go to larger and larger and larger venues. Ernest Holmes was very charismatic, and the people really loved him. Emerson says, "You are speak so loudly that I cannot hear what you say." What you are speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say. What Ernest Holmes was to everyone spoke so much louder than his words, so loudly that if they didn't even really understand the words, they understood him, and they loved him. And the underlying fundamental truth is that we cannot pour out love from within us and not expect to have it returned. It's the way that it works. Who I am being is what I receive back. And this was especially true of Ernest Holmes. It is said that he used to mentally give the entire audience a hug before he started speaking to them. I love that. So all of his questioning, all of his reading, and all of his studying had convinced him that not one of the truth movement leaders or doctrines contained the whole truth. Now, this included all philosophers, all mystics, all truth tellers throughout all of time. It included all of the new thought leaders, such as Emerson or Phineas Quimby or Emma Curtis Hopkins or Mary Baker Eddy or Thomas Troward. It included all of the Eastern faith traditions, and it included all of the Western faith traditions. He felt that the whole truth was probably too big to really be available to one person or one tradition. And it was at this time that he began to toy with the idea of a synthesis. And this synthesis is the foundation of the teaching of science of mind. He looked at wisdom from all different places, and he synthesized it down into this one teaching, the science of mind. Ernest Holmes never set out to create a new religion. What he believed was what people needed was a science or a philosophy or a practical way of living their lives. He didn't believe, as Mary Baker Eddy believed, that any one person or any one faith tradition was the only path, or that that one person or that one faith tradition had all the answers, but that we should seek to find that which we resonate with. And then, even after that, to always be open at the top. He didn't profess to be a guru, somebody that you just blindly followed. But instead, he encouraged each one of us to not believe what he said as the gospel, but to actually practice and prove to ourselves the principles and the practices in our own lives. Prove them to ourselves. Now, I believe that that's what each of us are here to do, is to prove it for ourselves. In Living the Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes says the science of mind is an outgrowth of the spiritual faith which people have had throughout the ages. Before science was conceived, the presence of God was felt. Before ever mental actions and reactions were analyzed, history was filled with instances of men and women who had experienced God. Who had experienced God. This is what we are here for, to have an experience of God. Now, one of our fundamental propositions that Cindy sang about earlier is that God is all that there is. And what we mean when we say God is all that there is we mean everything seen and unseen. What we say when we say that God is all that there is, we include everything, all possibility and all action. What we say when we say God is all that there is that we mean that God is the invisible essence and substance of all form. This spirit is immanent, transcendent, and always available. The science of mind says that within each of us is a spark of the divine, our Christ consciousness, and that each human being is a potential Christ. That we have within us an inherent God power that is a complete and unique manifestation of the One. We believe in the incarnation of Spirit in humankind and that all people are incarnations of the one Spirit. We believe in the unity of all life and that the highest God and the innermost God is one God. We believe that God is personal to all who feel this indwelling presence. We believe in the direct revelation of truth through our intuitive and spiritual nature, and that anyone may become a revealer of truth who lives in close contact with this indwelling God. It is a basic proposition of our philosophy that we live in a mental or spiritual universe and that things can be resolved down into thought. That we believe that the universal spirit, which is God, operates through the universal mind, which is the law of God, and that we are surrounded by this creative mind that receives the direct impress of our thoughts and then acts upon it. It is done unto us as we believe. Our thoughts create our experiences. This is the foundational upon which all scientific practice must be established. And when we are able to establish this premise in our own thoughts, then we will find ourselves equipped with a tool or an instrument or a practice through which we can change the experience of our lives. So the invitation today is to come with us on this journey, to dive deeply into the practices and the principles of the science of mind, to use it in our own lives consciously, and then to watch as all of our lives individually and collectively shift and change in many wonderful and glorious ways. And so it is. And so it is. So please turn within. And as I close my outer eyes, I am acutely aware of that presence, that power, that one spirit, that one life, that one love, that creative energy back of everything that there is. I call this power and presence God, and I know that it is who and what I am at my very core. This spark of the divine, this Christ consciousness, this light that is within me, is also within each and every single person here this morning. Each of us is a unique and divine expression of the divine, and ambassador of its presence on the planet. And it is from that place of a deep and abiding unity that I speak these words about and for each of us. Truly knowing that we are spiritual beings having a human incarnation, that we arrived on the planet imbued with all that we need to be our highest and best selves, all that we need to live the life that we love to live. And that as we powerfully step into these practices and principles of the science of mind teaching, practicing them in our own lives, we prove that they work. Our lives change, they shift. So I claim ease and grace around all of this for us, that we let loose anything that no longer serves us and allow ourselves to step into these practices powerfully. Allow ourselves to stay deeply connected to the divine within us, knowing that as we do so, our lives unfold with grace and with ease. I'm grateful for Ernest Holmes, for his insatiable curiosity and his voracious reading, for this deep understanding that what we are speaks louder than our words, and what I know that we are is an expression of God. And that's all we need to know. I claim ease and grace for us around knowing that, around being that, around allowing that to be expressed through and as us. And I'm so grateful to know this truth and to speak these words. So grateful for the power of prayer, knowing that these words are loosed into a law that only ever says yes, that they are clothed in form even as they are spoken. And so I speak them and release them with love and gratitude and full expectation of their manifestation, letting go and letting God be God. I invite each of us to anchor it for ourselves and for each other simply by saying, and so it is, and so it is. Thank you, everyone.